This episode was brought to you by Google Cloud, a partner that needs no introduction. What you might not have heard of, though, is that Google offers a Google for Startups cloud program where they give you access to startup experts, technical training, business support, and cover your Google Cloud costs up to $200,000 for 2 years, or even $350,000 if you're an AI startup. Scale your startup faster and smarter with Google Cloud. Head over to goo.gle/Swisspreneur.
When you talk to the serial founders who have gone through various startups and are serial entrepreneurs, they keep emphasizing to launch fast, test the market, and then move on. And I think this is a very deeply ingrained cultural hook that the more we hear from serial founders that you don't need to have this one perfect product to go into the market, maybe we can spark more courage to young entrepreneurs or upcoming entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Merle.
Welcome to another episode of the Swisspreneur podcast. Today I'm very excited to have Hans and Chris here with me, both from Google Cloud. Welcome, you two. How are you?
I'm great.
Very good. Thanks for having us.
I'm happy you're here. And I want to start with you, Hans, introducing both of you, of course, first. Also, maybe why you're here and how we got to this podcast, because you're an industry lead for digital native at Google Cloud, and you're organizing the Founder Stories events, which we've also taken part many times in the Google offices in Zurich. Can you tell us, Hans, what is the main driving force behind these events?
Yeah, so once again, thank you very much for having us here on the podcast. Huge fan of the Swisspreneur community, I would say, not just the podcast itself, but really what you guys have built. And yeah, so let me dismantle maybe a little bit of the terms, what you have mentioned. So digital native, maybe to start off with, is usually a term associated with people, right? So when they grow up as a digital native generation, they're used to tech. But what we do see is that there are generations of companies and startups, for that matter, also that there are digital native companies, right? So that is a term actually being used at Google Cloud to classify and categorize a certain sub-level of startups coming up, right? So as opposed to, I would say, the typical, for example, fashion startup, which, maybe has less of a tech center point. So this is an industry where I focus myself on a lot. And when I started at Google Cloud 4 years ago, it was, if you remember back, the first full year post-pandemic. So we wanted really to engage with the community on a different level, but it was very difficult at that time to understand how, right? What do people need after years and months of home office, remote working? And I think it's this question still unanswered today. So what we did is we went out to ask the folks and the founders, what do they need beyond just working with us as Google Cloud, but what do they need as a company? And what struck us the most is that they were missing community a lot. And that was kind of surprising to me, because there's a lot of huge, amazing events out there in Switzerland to bring startups together. But the middle kind of ground was, according to the founders we spoke to, missing. So you had either some WhatsApp group, which had hundreds of members, and at some point it got so big that people are kind of shy away to post really intimate questions into, or you have the large conference where the nature of connecting with each other is a different one. So we were like, okay, if we can do anything to provide and facilitate that need, is for sure we have the logistical means to it. We had rooms, we have event spaces. And, for the startups who came on stage at the Founder Story, for them sometimes it's helpful as well to have a little bit of a Google branding associated with it. So what the Founder Story is a regular event series where founders come together, and there's always a few founders coming on stage talking about, as the title says, their founder story. It's the blood, sweat, and tears moment. It's the unfiltered truth. It's the highs and lows, the things which make a founder a true founder, so that others in the audience, on the one hand, feel more connected, but also hopefully also avoid doing the same mistakes they see and hear from the founders on stage. So yeah, very much in the spirit of what Swisspreneur is also doing, but just a little bit of a different format.
How many have you done actually so far?
Oof. So the scale of Founder Story, we started off with 12 people in the room. I jokingly say...
Really? Is that small to begin with?
It was super small. And I mean, we cheated everything just to make it look a little bit bigger. We had like those tables put around so that it looked like a lounge table and just to spread out across the room so it doesn't look so empty. So we started with 12 really courageous founders who were like, okay, we do the first step. Out of that, we grew in Switzerland out to 1,200 like followers in the community there. We've done it for 4 years now, and we had about easily like more than 20 episodes so far. But beyond that, what makes me really, really proud is that it started to, after the year one already, our colleagues from the Berlin office were kind of pinging us and they were like, hey, what are you guys doing here? It's really, really cool. Can we copy? And we were like, sure, take it, make it bigger, make it Berlin worthy. Yeah. And now it's running over 15 countries across the globe.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's a really cool story. And Chris, the other voice that you've already heard. So you lived in the Bay Area for 5 years.
Correct.
Working at Uber during its like pre-IPO area. And now you're in Switzerland as partner manager also at Google Cloud. What made you trade Silicon Valley for Zurich?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, well, it's absolute pleasure to be here today. And the first thing is, I don't think it's necessarily a trade in some ways, because I'm working for Google. So I'm still have that connection to the Bay Area in some ways. But first off, a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from the US, been at Google for 3.5 years, and Hans and I are working together on the Founder Story. And then I'm also managing the Swisspreneur partnership, of course. And I think it's not necessarily a direct trade, but it's more like, what are the differences and how do you also combine both of those together? I mean, I have a bit of a personal connection to here. So my father lived in Switzerland for 10 years. So my whole family was here, my parents, then we all moved to the US. Oh, okay. So I was born here originally. So I've always had that connection to the Swiss ecosystem in some ways, or like from a very personal side. There were two things that happened. Well, like three. The first was it was COVID. So that's
thing that happened.
This is a time of change for many people. And I was thinking, what is my next step in my career? And I'd always wanted to do my MBA and wanted to do that in Europe. Yeah. So then I started to look at different programs, and that's where I came across the High-Scale MBA program. And then I signed up for that. That was kind of the initial idea when I was in the Bay Area. And then this personal connection as well. And that's where I really decided to make that jump. And I really enjoy it here a lot. Been here for 5 years. Still working on German, but in time.
Fair enough. It's not an easy language.
And then in my role today, I manage the DACH market, managing our ISVs, independent software vendors. So essentially what that is companies like ServiceNow, NVIDIA, not necessarily a software vendor, but they do have software products that they position with our customers. Or Workday is another one that I manage. And what we do is we ensure they run on Google Cloud, and then we position them in our top customers in DACH. And that does connect to the role and the work I'm doing with Hans in the Founder Story, because it's software providers. And these are software providers at very large scale. And there's a lot of learnings that we can take from those folks and apply that to the startup ecosystem with Founder Story.
So today we want to also talk about innovation, entrepreneurship in Switzerland, of course, but with like global mindset and that having that also top of mind. So can you tell us, like, what was it like at Uber pre-IPO? What did you learn for yourself? Like, what were takeaways for you?
Yeah, it was a exciting time to be at Uber. There was at one point with Uber where they were losing $1.25 billion. So the way I described this period was, at that time at least, is one of these unique examples of where VCs were directly deploying capital to customers. Because there was such a price war between Lyft and Uber, where you had this point when there was crazy discounts on trips. So incentives.
The good old times for
yeah,
customers.
Yeah, well, pre-COVID. This is around 2016, 2017. I joined in 2017. Actually, my first day at Uber was when Anthony Lewandowski had his issue, the lawsuit between Waymo, where he was leaving Uber and taking trade secrets to Waymo, which is a massive court case. Yeah. And I remember listening to that on the news, and then I showed it to my first day at work. I was there for a few months when Travis Kalanick was there, and then the new CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi, was there, who just joined. And that was also an interesting time of change. So that was one takeaway I'd say is lots of change. Mm-hmm. The second I would say is I think when you have a hyper-growth, fast company like Uber, at that time it was the fastest growing private company. You have so many people join. There's no processes in place. Lots of extremely smart people. And it was incredible being around that ecosystem. I think at the same time, there's a lot of confidence that comes with different people that come in, Harvard MBAs, top tier talent, and fantastic to work with. But it taught me as well that whoever you're working with, everyone's figuring it out together. So they come in with sometimes pretty big egos. Every meeting, you had to really be ready to push your objectives, be very forward thinking. So I think in a way, Uber taught me confidence to really stand up for your opinions, really double down on them. And then realizing that the people that are also defending against that opinion or you're negotiating with them, they might not even know what they're doing themselves because it was such an entirely new business model. Because I really wanted to think about my time from Uber a bit. And I think that was definitely a learning too, that it's about team. Everyone's coming together. You're building something entirely new. Like, how do you build an entirely new business model in Europe for taxis when taxis have been around for decades and decades, maybe longer, right? It's entirely different. And then the third thing I would say is from the CEO of Uber, so Dara, who I mentioned. He did an incredible job of setting the operational strategy. There's so much that can go wrong on an Uber trip. I mean, think about it, the countless amount of things that can go wrong. Yeah, so much can happen on an Uber trip, and that makes it very operationally complex, operationally also very costly as well, right? And what Dara did is he did a really good job of going into the different markets and operating and executing and deciding on focus. So if Uber wasn't going to be number one or number two in each market, I remember being in All Hands and he said this, we're going to exit within 6 months or something, 6 to 12 months. And he did that. Jump Bikes got sold to Lime when I was there. Grab bought Uber. Kareem, the M&A activity happened there. There was just 3 to 4 other examples, if not even more. And that intense level of focus is what got Uber to become a profitable business today. So yeah, so the 3 things in summary, I'd say just that speed and moving quick. And then the second being, there's a lot of smart people in the room, but just stand up for your beliefs and you'll be amazed what you can get done. Like the projects that we were able to complete were amazing. And then the third is how important focus is.
So interesting that you say that, because I had a discussion on another podcast a couple of weeks ago where also the founder of this company, she also said focus. It's so important because you're so you're also so excited about all the things that you do with your company and the things that you could do, but just get it down, just focus and make that work. And then everything else will also kind of follow. So I think it's very interesting that you say that.
Yeah. And there were some exciting projects and stories I have along the way. Actually, I realized I didn't share what my role was. So I sat on a team in SF, and we were essentially a global strategy team looking through our footprint for customer support in regards to physical customer support sites. There's actually, I looked it up. There's one in Zurich still. There was 650 support locations they called Greenlight hubs globally across the world in 2017. I don't know how many there are now. I would imagine it's quite a bit less. Where drivers would come in to get onboarded, any questions that they had, support issues, even a vehicle inspection would have to occur there. So I was out visiting all these different sites. So I spent a lot of time with drivers, face-to-face, focus groups. Yeah, there's many stories from that time.
I didn't even know that those existed.
Yeah. It's near Stockerhof. That's,
Coolest location you visited during that time?
Cairo.
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
Mexico City was a good one too.
That's cool.
Mexico City, it was Didi was also there, and Bolt. I believe it was Bolt. It was a long time ago now. And they were all right next to each other.
Yeah.
And these sites would see 1,500 drivers a week, if not even sometimes more. And there'd be huge lines.
Yeah.
So then the Didi guys would stand out front, right outside of the perimeter of Uber, and then they would try to give better offers than Uber to get the drivers to go over there. This is how Uber was. You rolled up your sleeves and like as I kind of said before, you leave the titles at the door. I went to a very good school in the US, but it wasn't an Ivy League school, Indiana University. And it's leave the titles at the door, leave where you went to school. It's like, let's get to work, and the best idea wins.
Yeah.
Was really the case at Uber. Yeah.
And now that you're in Switzerland, what do you think Switzerland has on the US?
I think they're just completely different scales.
Yeah.
So I did a bit of research before the podcast today. So for example, I looked it up. There's 9 unicorns in Switzerland, according to Gemini. In the US, in San Francisco, just in the Bay Area, there was like 190. I think it was 197 or something like that it said. Wow. It's just, we're talking about different scales.
Yeah.
It's a 19x difference, right? It's like, it's just it's scaling factors. So I think, what does Switzerland have on the US? It's just different, you know? But I think there's many amazing qualities of Swiss life and in general, just living here, like the day-to-day, I mean. But then on the professional side, there's many great business opportunities. Yeah. So if I had to answer it, I would say Switzerland has a really good location proximity within Europe, which we all know. True. Like, they're kind of obvious answers, right? But multilingual. So products that could do extremely well here are ones where it's one application in the US that you want to transition to Europe and localize it into the different markets. Because the multilingual piece of it, it's very easy for a Swiss company then to scale to Italy, France, Germany, Austria. Yeah. And then, as also is in the Bay Area, but also not to be undervalued, is I think ETH is just the most highly respected program and institution. Yeah. It's just so well known in Europe. Frankly, it's not as well known in the US, but it should be. I mean, it's just a top program. And that is, that's a lot of the reason why the Google office is here in Zurich, right? Yeah. And we have around 6,000 employees in Zurich, massive site that Google has here. Yeah. A part of that has to do with ETH, right? And that deep tech talent's going to continue to flow into startups here, and that's a huge differentiator. Yeah.
If I may chime in, it's actually a very interesting perspective, right? Because we, in fact, did an episode around that topic once at the Founder Story, where we had Pascal from Founderful, we had Yannick from Deep Judge, we had Daniel Danchi from Cradle, all three of them ex-Googlers. And with the one provocative question is, do big techs hire away all the talents Switzerland has, given that it's already such a small place? And all of them, and it was unscripted, we didn't prepare them, they didn't know about each other as answer, said very aligned that they're so happy that there is this ecosystem we have here today. And all of them, and for example, Yannick and Daniel were both tech founders, and they both said that there's such a strong engineering ecosystem here. Where maybe, and that's just a hypothesis, but without the tech companies, it must be even harder to get to good talents. And Daniel gave the example in his talk that they had the other office in Amsterdam, and he said it's already much harder there to find really good engineering talent here. So I think given the size of Switzerland, we have a huge concentration of very, very good, talented engineers.
Yeah. 100%.
For sure. Yeah. And also something that, like, talking about the founder stories, because you just said in the US or San Francisco, it's like easier to scale fast. Is this something that you've seen with the startups that you had present, or like a challenge that you've noticed that in Switzerland they just scale slower?
It's a very common question at the Founder Story. We ask the panelists, right? Like, what in all different shapes of form, this question comes up, whether it is, do we not have the market right to scale fast. So basically, what is it that we cannot scale so fast? And I think one thing people agree is that sometimes it's a little bit of the mindset and linked to different things. So very common theme, what it distills down to is the failure culture, right? We hear this a lot that, it is part of the working cultures want to do things right and solve the problem first before you launch it. But then when you talk to the serial founders who have gone through various startups and are serial entrepreneurs, they keep emphasizing to launch fast, test the market, and then move on. And I think this is a very deeply ingrained cultural hook that the more we hear from serial founders that you don't need to have this one perfect product to go into the market, maybe we can spark more courage to young entrepreneurs or upcoming entrepreneurs. So just the last episode, we had Rafael Vierte from Carify. He's a serial entrepreneur as well. And he literally started on day 3 of founding Carify by sending out emails to potential partners and customers already. They had no software, they had no prototype, they just had a business idea. But because he knew from his previous company, Sherpenny, he knew that you need to know if the market is ready. And so the business idea was strong. So literally he sent out just cold calling emails or cold emails. And if you look at how Carify is doing today, it's really, really amazing. And, one of the leading car sharing platforms in Switzerland.
Would you underline the cultural differences?
The cultural differences are one thing, but scaling, how do you scale? You scale with capital and a large enough use case in TAM. And what are the problems that a lot of Swiss startups and scale-ups are solving? Sometimes they're large enough TAMs. Also, it's deep tech, which can, in theory, also be a large market. So that's one side of it. And then it's the capital. So in the age of AI, capital is critical because it funds the growth of the data centers, right? Never before have we seen the amount of capital deployed from venture into these LLMs, and it's so consolidated into Anthropic and just a very small selection, OpenAI, of course, a very small selection of AI companies, right? And that's the other piece. You scale with capital and large enough TAM, right? So it has nothing to do with culture. And I actually think that's an opportunity because it's a very, very great and amazing startup ecosystem and culture in Switzerland. And coming here from the Bay Area, it's not the reason why I moved here, but I heard of Google when I first moved here. I knew there was the office here. I met with a engineer before I moved out to Switzerland who was working at Google in Zurich, just to understand what was the current state of the office here and what types of talent is being hired for when I was looking for roles before I joined Google. And it's been around for a long time, the Google office. How many years have we had our office here? For
20 years. We
for
celebrated
20 years. Yeah.
Last year.
So these aren't new things, and clearly you don't set up an office here if there's not an amazing culture that you can build on top of it. So that's my view on how you scale to that next level. And the final point I would say is we do in a way have the capital here. Zurich is really a finance hub. So with that, there's the capital's there. We just have to find it, right? I think it's a opportunity.
But isn't that still a cultural difference? Just not from the startups maybe or the founders, but from the capital givers? Deploying
the capital, yes.
Yeah.
Being conservative, yeah. That's definitely a factor. Yeah.
And then especially if I'm an investor, I'm not an investor, but what I hear investors are saying, institutional as well as private investors, is that the type of startups you have here, the ones that are really strong, sometimes have a asymmetric life cycle of, let's say, a hyperscaler startup, right? So let's take biomedical startups or robotic startups, right? It takes years of building prototypes until they have a market viable, ready company, right? So it takes a lot of R&D. So naturally, as an investor, it is not an easy money, right? It has a very large upside. But so if you look at it, startups here in Switzerland very strong in robotics, like Wingtra, like Antibiotics, River, all these companies, right? Like it's a huge, like it's capital investment intense industry, very disruptive, but it maybe takes a longer time for investors to see a return versus if you have like a SaaS startup, right? So maybe it's a combination of that as well, which, why you don't see this explosion of investments in there. The risk is very huge, depending on the industry.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you mentioned AI before, Chris. So I mean,
it had to come eventually.
We have to talk about this topic. And I would be interested to learn from both of you because you both see so many different startups in Switzerland. Is Switzerland good in implementing AI? Is it what you expect Swiss startups to implementing
technologies? I wouldn't be able to say specifically because my role is working with the large software providers where even some of them themselves are deploying LLMs. So for instance, I manage Anthropic, right? I wouldn't be able to say specifically for Switzerland.
Yeah.
But generally my point of view would be that most companies in the technology space are the first movers. At Google Cloud, we are seeing enterprises as well deploying Gemini, Vertex AI, our different solutions. NVIDIA, I manage. There's a customer we're speaking to that has a warehouse and they want to, with their robotics, to essentially simulate that exact warehouse, figure out exactly where the packages should be so it's the most efficient. NVIDIA has a product a SaaS solution that would be sold on top of their chips, which we're co-selling with them. So that's an example of an enterprise that's really leaning in, and I'm hearing more and more of these direct use cases. For Anthropic, there's a lot of investment that we're seeing in regards to augmenting the engineers. That's something I'm seeing constantly. I got a couple emails about it today with a few customers. Like that's really, there's a lot of traction there. Yeah. And so I can't answer the question directly for startups in the Swiss market, but for enterprises across DACH, the answer is yes. And I would imagine it's the same, especially for tech.
Would you agree?
I don't think startups are the challenge here when it comes to implementation or good implementation. I mean, look at the landscape. You have DeepJudge, you have Yokoi. Like all of these companies existed before the AI craze kind of took over the market, right? So they understood the power of the technology they're working with and what it can do. I think what the challenge is, and now I'm opening up to all the startups I'm working with, is what I see a lot is their end customers being ready to deploy AI, right?
It's kind of to my point with the enterprises.
Exactly. So most of them, they sell into larger corporation enterprises, and it's that hurdle where they struggle to position the latest of technology, right? So I think it's not the startups not implementing it right. If anything, they actually understand the importance and of being at the forefront of it. So this is a battle I do a lot with the startups I work together with, right? It's like, how can we position them in a way that larger corporations they try to get into with their technology don't distrust the ability of them just because they're a smaller company or a startup.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's a battle, I think, which needs a lot of contributors to fight. Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Google Cloud. On December 4th, Google Cloud is hosting the final edition of the year for their event series, The Founder's Story. They are taking over the Forum Escher at Google Zurich for a panel called From Entrepreneur to Investor. Join us to hear directly from visionary leaders about the transition from building companies to funding them and the challenges and rewards found along the way. Speakers include Andreas Göldi, partner at B2 Venture, Nicole Herzog, co-founder of Umantis, angel investor and board member, and Mathieu Chanson, founding partner at Very Early Ventures. If you're a founder or CXO in Zurich, you should definitely be there. It's happening at 6 p.m. on December 4th. Check the link in our show notes to grab your spot before it fills up. A big thanks to Google Cloud for bringing the community together for this one.
How good are you in your department's day-to-day implementing
I'm
AI
constantly
solutions?
using it.
Yeah.
I'm constantly using it. I've learned, if you know the adoption curve, I've learned over the years more and more about myself that I'm the second mover. So the new iPhone comes out, I always wait a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes even wait a couple of years, right? Now the iPhones are a bit repetitive, but back,
Yeah.
earlier days. And then I was also the same with AI. We had BART, this a product that was launched. It seemed pretty cool, but I played around with it a little bit, and that was it. Gemini then was launched. Started to use it a little bit day to day, and it's not my default yet, but it should be. I still go to different solutions to figure out an answer to something, not necessarily talking about search, like if I'm trying to create a document or anything like that, but it's so useful. It's really incredible. It just saves so much time.
It does.
Well, at Google, you have a very playful way to get your hands on like first technology coming out. I mean, there's a program internally, and I think it's not that much of a secret because you can read up on it. It's called dog fooding. So as the term says, eat your own dog food. There's programs you can sign up for, so you can be an internal tester. It can be anything, right? It can be the new Pixel phone, but also testing the latest version of Gemini. And I'm more on the side of Chris. I'm not the first tester, but even if you're not, chances are that some colleagues around you are dog fooding something, and by that you already see what's possible. And then back to your question, now in our day-to-day life, I mean, it's easier to count the days where I don't use AI because I would notice it. So it's just in one way or another, starting from writing an email with the autofill, that is AI, right? Already there, to creating slide decks, researching for meetings or podcasts, right? So it's very assistive, I have to say. And I mean, it sounds biased to say that, but I love it.
Well, just like rewriting stuff. That's what I do.
Yeah, and there's two buckets. There's the first is collaboration. So that's what we're seeing on a day to day. And then the second is, with many sub buckets underneath it, these enterprise type use cases, or maybe across all sizes of companies, where you can have a specific need and you're trying to make something more efficient. Example would be customer support. So when I was at Uber, there was 10,000 customer support agents across 8 sites, and then 30,000 external customer support agents, again, to how operationally complex an Uber trip is, or Uber Eats. And think what you can do with that now with AI. I'm quite concerned about worker displacement. That's something that we're going to go through a transition, I think, at some point in the future. But then when you just add up the math, it makes perfect sense for big tech companies, enterprises to find and use these tools to be more efficient and grow their businesses further as well, right? So there's really two buckets. There's what we're using it on a day-to-day basis, which can also be fun, like creating an image, with Nano Banana, which Google released. Then there's also the business application sides, and that's, later. It's still developing, right? But we're seeing it more and more with our customers.
Can you actually explain a bit more about how you support startups, or like what kind of products you support startups with at Google Cloud?
I mean, we can start from the official perspective first. So there's an official program called the Google Cloud for Startup program with different sub-tiers. There's a sub-tier for AI startups. There's a sub-tier for Web3, where you can apply for as a self-service program, and then there's a bit of a background check, and then you get credits. So what the credits do is it allows you to use the Google Cloud products up to a certain amount. I think as of today, if you check it out, it can be anything between $100,000 to $250,000 worth of Google Cloud credits. And that is a lot, because it allows you to use really the latest technologies and build prototypes, right? Right this morning, I came off a call with a startup still yet in the founding process. And they already know they're going to have a lot of costs running VMs, running like machine learning models. And that is a huge accelerator for a startup to get going, because sometimes you still need to refine your software and your models, but you don't have that heavy capital investment, especially in days like these where investments are scarce and it's harder to get to, that is, at least from a technological perspective, a huge help for the startups. Beyond that, and this is why Founder Story still exists after 4 years, because, it's a project. To most people's surprise, it's not an official department behind the Founder Stories. It's just a lot of crazy Googlers like Chris and me who take some extra time and carve out of the daily life and create something really magical for a community, which is so exhilarating to work with. And seeing the people coming together and the knowledge exchange, again, any partners we work with, like such as Swisspreneur, we agree that there couldn't be enough like surfaces where founders meet and exchange. There's different platforms and different levels of intimacy. And I think if Google can help facilitate that, that is a huge accelerator. And that's not coming from us. That's the feedback we hear from all the attendees. And then it gets crazy, of course, the closer you work with us as a startup and the more you invested into using the Google Cloud technology. Sometimes there are cases where you can co-create products, where you can really work side by side with a Google engineering team to co-develop things. And yeah, there's quite a few startups out there doing that already today in Switzerland.
Oh, that's incredible. I think it's such a great resource for startups. And Chris, I know that you're also investing on the side.
Yeah.
Next to doing other things on the side,
From
you
time
also
to time.
invest. What is, in your opinion, like the next big opportunity for investors in Switzerland?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'd like to add to Hans's comment. Google also has a startup mentorship program. There's one in the US, one in EMEA, and I'm sitting on that program. What makes Google amazing is there's so many different teams, and you have the 20% project, right? I don't know if you've heard of this before, where a Googler can spend 20% of their time to invest in a topic outside of their core job. And with that, you have so many different programs that are developed that you kind of just find out through word of mouth. So I'm part of the EMEA Startup Mentorship Program, but that sits separately from Founder Story and the credit program as well. And we have cohorts. So we have 1 to 2 cohorts a year, maybe even a bit more. And a mentor will apply, and then a startup will select you. And then you're part of a 6-week program where then I would help them and prepare their pitch. And then we bring investors. In the UK office was the last one, and they can listen to the pitch. It's more for investing in the startup, less the credits, because it's not tied directly to Google Cloud. And the next cohort is open now. I close the next couple of weeks, and the topic is energy. So,
That's exciting.
And it does segue somewhat into my angel investing, actually. So I've been investing as much as I can, on the side of my full-time job in my career since 2017. I invested in a B2B SaaS company called Orderful, Novell. I invested in last year, which is a energy company, which essentially is augmenting commercial real estate with batteries. So installing them in the floor plan. And then when it's in the evening, when the megawatts per hour are a lot cheaper, which in the US, there's huge spikes, they charge the batteries. I think that's an amazing investment opportunity. Like, one thing that's totally clear to me is with the amount of CapEx spend going into AI and these data centers, I don't think that's going to go away. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy with Oracle and NVIDIA setting up a partnership, and then it's a circular motion where OpenAI is also involved there, or who's going to host it. And that's kind of to be determined if this growth rate is going to continue. But at the same time, I think energy is always going to be that backbone for it, and it's going to continue in that growth. So I think energy is an amazing space to invest, and I'm really looking quite a bit into that. And then the last would be, and it's AI. So at the application layer, though, so I invested in a company called Bloom Studios, which is a SaaS product that works with media agencies, and they're doing generated images for marketing campaigns. So if Swisspreneur wanted to create a marketing campaign, you could create artificial self-generated images with AI. It's similar to what Google's products are doing, but it's focused at the agency level. So they're partnering with all the marketing agencies and developing custom campaigns. Oh. And that's the second theme I think is really important. So it's the way I view it is there's the value chain of AI. So on the left-hand side, you have energy. On the right-hand side, you have all the AI companies that are coming out on the application layer. In the middle, you could have the LLMs, right? And across that, there's really good investment opportunities there. I'm more focused on the right-hand side now, and I'm doing more and more connecting with different VCs and funds and seeing how I can participate. There's some really cool companies coming out there. So on the right-hand side.
That sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Hans, from your perspective, not from like maybe not a founder's perspective, but because you're so involved into the startup scene also in Switzerland, what kind of developments do you see maybe also with economic, circumstances happening? Where is the Swiss startup scene developing to?
I like to take a lens over the last 2 to 3 years because I think that really was a pivotal moment, not just in Switzerland, but globally. But I can speak it from the perspective working with Swiss startups during that time, is that the nature of fundraising has changed dramatically, right? I jokingly say there was this peak time around 2020, 21, maybe it's starting 22, where it felt like you can just pitch something on a napkin to an investor and you get multi-million-dollar funding, right? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I mean, the stories you hear sometimes were almost as crazy as that. But that kind of stopped, right? And startups were forced either naturally by economic forces or through their investors, which already had invested, to focus more on profitability, right? And that's a very different game than just raising and running for growth with your KPIs, because it's a very different discipline, right? You have to be frugal. You have to be very disciplined on where you spend the money. And some entrepreneurs who joined the founders game maybe had a different perception of it. But the ones who did succeed and were ready to roll up the sleeve and do the, let's say, not so exciting part of entrepreneurship, which is frugality, which is, sometimes tough communication to the team. I remember stories from founders where they had to call off certain projects with potential customers because it would just ruin the direction of where the company was heading. And by focusing really on what they're good at, without needing a lot of capital or optimizing towards profitability, made them a lot more resilient now 2 to 3 years after, right? So when you look at those startups, they have a much healthier way of running business in terms of capital side, but as well as, and it trickles down, like the capital defines the culture, the health, the maybe happiness. I mean, shout out to the team at Evenito, right? Like there's multiple articles published how they focused on bootstrapping and really survive. I mean, what a crazy story. Evenito was the first customer joining Founder Story, and they're an event management software. And now think back of COVID, where all the companies canceled events, and you're an event management startup. That was brutal, right?
Tough position.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God.
Virtual events, but.
And again, the team was so amazing by just really focusing on their core business and trying to find a way to, first of all, survive that area of COVID where no corporations were doing events anymore. And now look at them, like they're thriving. They just moved into a new office. It looks amazing. And I mean, really, this is one of the hero cases I celebrate so much.
Yeah.
Because it was not the typical, let's say, big fundraising kind of game. And they're thriving. They're really doing great.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how COVID, but also all kinds of pivotal moments kind of like shape also the people behind
living here
the
because
startups.
COVID gave me the idea.
Yeah.
So.
See? And I actually wanted to ask you before we conclude, what is like, because the next Founder Story is coming up, do you already have a topic? When is it happening? Like, who's coming? Can we come? Tell us about it.
You guys should definitely come. Hans?
Yeah, so it's definitely happening. It's on the 4th of December, and it is back at the Google office. For those who have never been inside a Google office, it's at the Europale campus. I think we can post a link in the caption later. Yeah, and the topic is how entrepreneurs turn investors, because it's a very interesting discipline to see when you were an entrepreneur once, and now that you made it and you become an investor, has your perspective changed on how you look at what a successful startup should be? So we will find out from 3 speakers how they look at this topic.
Very exciting. Yeah. That sounds like a really cool topic. I'm excited. Mark your calendars, people. And to finish up, I want to ask both of you, of course, some concluding questions. So, looking back at also maybe the time in the US, but also now here in Switzerland, Chris. So maybe what's for you is the number one skill that Swiss startup founders need to accelerate and or really grow with if they want to expand into the US?
If I were to think about that one a bit, the way that I would view it is one of the most important things when you're going to the US is how you approach and position your sales teams, because that's where you get the most cultural differences, where your sellers are speaking directly with the customers, obviously marketing as well. So where is that touch point within the culture? So I think one thing definitely to look out for would be that decision on when you want to just hire locally within the US. The thing that makes the US, and many reasons for the success of it, it's a very homogenous region. So yes, the accent's different in Boston versus the West Coast. Yes. But the culture, yeah, it's different. People would argue the baseball teams, football teams, or whatever the difference is. But it's generally the same. The buying behaviors, the way that you approach selling is similar, right? So it's about having someone there that's localized, perhaps even anywhere in the US, just as close as possible to your customers, and is really aligned with the European culture and your seller themselves, and knowing how to position that product in that localized way. I think that would be something I recommend to look out for the most. I've seen companies from Europe that scale to the US, and that's one of the problems that they tend to face. Again, it's hard to answer this question. It really, really depends. And it comes to the point where I've seen from the software providers that I manage, they even relocate to the US. Oh. They changed their CEO from Munich to the US, for instance, for a partner that I was managing. Yeah. And culture has a big impact, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But then it comes back to the original point of how do you scale? So capital and then large enough use case. So if you have the large enough use case, great. But a lot of the capital is in the US. So that's also why some people would decide to transition their headquarters to the US, right? Yeah.
And now, you, Hans, imagine you would be somebody with that capital. So let's say, hypothetically, you'd be an investor. What would make you say, yes, I will, to a startup investment?
It's an interesting journey how my perspective have pivoted over time working so intensively with startup. Whereas at the beginning, working years ago, starting working with startups, I would have said, do you have a cutting edge product? Are you at the forefront of innovation? How competitive is your solution versus the incumbents? And now having accompanied so many journeys and seeing rise and fall of startups, I think where I pay more attention to is the founders team, because so many, even successful startups today, have pivoted so drastically from their initial idea, right? Look at Beekeeper. It was supposed to be a dating platform, and now they're one of the most successful communication tools for non-desk workers. And and I think that kind of pivot is only possible if you have a really, really strong founders team, which you can trust, right? Because you gotta have to make a lot of difficult decisions very early on, and including pivoting your core product. So I would really, and the question is, how do you measure or detect a strong founders team? And I think it goes down to feedback culture, openness, the way how they interact, the level of difficulty of topics they can approach without escalating in conflict, because that happens. I think these are key indicators to see if you have a strong founders team. And I think that would be today, if I was to invest, my number one factor to pay attention to.
Yep. I think that's sums it good up. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, Hans. And one thing I would add to that, if you don't mind. So there's a company I invested in called Orderful. This is my first angel investment. I put a very small check in. They're an EDI solution, and they were backed by Initialized. It's like a purchase order B2B SaaS solution. And they were backed by Initialized and then AZ16 For the initialized round, thankfully, Gary Chan is a famous angel investor, and my friend who's the CEO, he was able to meet with him. And I asked him, what are the 3 things that Gary looks for in a successful company? That was really interesting to hear this. So the first that Gary said to my friend Eric was, you just have a good feeling of the founding team. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to fake the vibe of it. It has to just feel right. And that's, in venture, a lot of it is gut, especially in the early stages. But then the second thing he said was, have they done it before? Repeat founders typically are successful, right? And that was something that apparently, as Eric said, Gary really looks out for. And then the third point is it a large enough market? It's exactly what you said with Beekeeper. That's the reason why I wanted to add this point. Is it large enough where you mess up in one part of the market, you can easily pivot to that next piece, like next part of the market? So communication, very easy to pivot, right? Where if it was a very focused use case, you wouldn't be successful because you wouldn't be able to pivot. Right? Because you're always going to learn along the way and realize like half of your assumptions are going to be wrong. More than half of your assumptions are going to be wrong. Right? So it's how do you get that right dynamic like culture and like energy with the founding team that you can pivot. So I thought it was interesting. Yeah.
That's a cool insight. That's really nice.
Yeah.
So I want to finish up the episode with a round of rapid fire questions. So how it works, I'll ask you questions, usually this or that question, and you just say the first thing that speaks to you most. I'll start with you, Chris. Bay Area or Zurich?
Zurich. I got to say Zurich.
Nice. Hans, podcasting or public speaking?
Well, it's my first podcast today. I would still stay with public speaking for now.
And then the last one is for both of you. Uber or Bolt?
Uber.
Uber.
There it is. Yes. Thank you, Hans.
Yes.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show and sharing all your insights and your experiences.
Yeah.
Mark your calendars for December 4th. And we're looking forward to seeing you on another podcast soon again. Well, hearing you, I guess.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Millie.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.